The crystal owl in the hotel gleamed like a block of crystal under the desert sun. The main conference floor was carpeted thick, the air laced with polished wood and a faint chill of cold metal. Inside the Olna Grand Hall, $1 billion negotiation between the British delegation and Gulf energy tycoon Sheikh Zayed Al Nahyan was spiraling downward. Ethan Brooks, head of the British side, adjusted his cuff for the 10th time. Interpreter Nolan Pierce wiped his brow. Then it happened. The slip, financial guarantee, became upfront payment in translation. The air pitched like a ship in a sudden headwind. Zayd shot to his feet, his white gutra trembling faintly, gold-rimmed glasses flashing under chandelier. His voice rolled out in Gulf Arabic, controlled, cold, razor-sharp. The British didn't fully grasp the words, only the insult in his tone. Zayd turned for the door. The deal teetered on the edge. From a corner, a black woman in a cream housekeeping uniform had been there all along, hands on a mop handle like a balancing staff. Madison Carter, 26, hair pulled back, barefaced, eyes calm and bright. She set the mop gently against the wall like placing a witness and stepped forward half a pace. Bowing her head just so, she said in clear, flawless Arabic, "Forgive me, sir. They are not asking for advance payment. They mean a fair guarantee that honors a partnership." The room froze. Whispering died. Zayd halted in the doorway, eyes locking onto her like a hawk. He asked, "Lo, you speak my language." Madison bowed again precisely. "I lived in Oman for 8 years." Ethan's mouth fell open. A pen slipped from an aide's fingers. Nolan pushed up his glasses as if to slap himself. For a heartbeat, the old order, where titles, skin color, and job roles decided worth, cracked. But the room's reflex to defend itself snapped back. Clea Reed, designer scarf at her throat, tilted her head and said loud enough to carry, "Who let the maid in here? Think you're part of the delegation." Beside her, a man with a hulking watch laughed. "Maybe she's here to clean up our translation mess." Chuckles rippled out. Madison didn't turn. Her shoulders shifted by a breath, a signal enough that she'd heard. Still in Arabic, she said softly but clearly, "Intent is a key." The words rolled across the room like a glass bead, coming to rest at the center of a negotiation, meaning above wording. The door slammed open. Paul Hargrove, the slick-haired, bright-tie hotel manager, strode in like a small, sharp blade of authority. He grabbed Madison's sleeve, voice sharp. "What do you think you're doing? You have no right to interfere in negotiations." Madison didn't pull away. She met his eyes and gave the smallest nod, like ending a sentence. Paul's tone hardened. "You're housekeeping. You mop floors. You don't belong in this room." The words "don't belong" hit the floor like an old verdict. A few Brits bent over their phones. Zayd stood still, arms crossed, eyes still on Madison. No rush to judge. Madison left the room. The mop still stood in the corner, silent witness to how job titles get used to crush talent. The service hall smelled faintly of disinfectant and frying oil. Bryce Miller, the burly head chef, swung his ladle like a hammer. "What? The maid thinks she's in charge now." Laughter burst out. A wet rag flew and slapped the floor near her feet. Madison bent, folded it neatly, and set it on her cart. Her gaze didn't flinch, her voice even. "Work doesn't need a title." The laughter died mid-breath. In the lobby, diamonds dotted the guest's clothes. Reagan Hale, in fur, lifted her champagne and spoke loud enough. Was that maid just now trying to be a diplomat? A loud Thai man beside her hollered, "Stick to your mop, honey." Madison paused half a beat, turned her head, eyes steady and cutting. A mop cleans floors. What cleans arrogance? The champagne glass froze midair. They looked away from her gaze like from a mirror. She pushed through the revolving door into sunlight. In her apron pocket, the notebook pressed warm and steady like a brick underfoot. Back in the meeting room, Ethan tried to force papers back into order. The air was as sour as lemon. Nolan cleared his throat, trying to restart. Zayd still hadn't left. Silence stretched heavy. Finally, Zayd's voice landed low and certain like driving in a stake. "Let her sit." Ethan blinked. "So?" Zayd looked straight at Paul near the door, repeated slower. "Let her sit. She will translate." The scrape of a chair across the wooden floor sounded like a new boundary being drawn. Someone went to call her back. Outside, an invisible thread seemed to tug Madison toward the room. She stepped back through the doorway. No apology for her presence, only the precise bow. The mop was still in the corner, bearing witness to a different kind of clean about to begin, one free of prejudice and pride. A chair was added to the table. The sound of wood meeting floor felt like the signing of a new treaty, a treaty of competence. Madison sat back straight, notebook open, the corner of the page smooth flat beneath her finger. Nolan Pierce restated the terms. Madison translated cleanly, precisely, with nuance, financial guarantee as a risk-sharing mechanism, respectful partner as a code of conduct that preserved both sides' dignity. The room's breathing began to even out. Zaid al-Fulan listened, giving the faintest nod when Madison preserved the desert tent metaphor he just used. The tent stands firm when its stakes are driven deep into the same piece of ground. Madison rendered it into English without turning it into a joke, keeping its rhythm and weight. Suspicious eyes softened. The negotiating ship stopped rocking. During the break, Claire Aya Reid approached like a velvet wrap needle. Her smile curved into a sickle. I bet you think you're special. Truth is, you're out of your depth. Madison set her pen down, slow and deliberate. Depth isn't measured by job title. Clay's smile cracked like crazed porcelain. A few of the Grant Whitman delegates glanced over, then ducked back to their phones like school kids caught cheating. In the next session, a delegate used a phrase that could easily spark national pride. Madison softened it by changing the sentence structure, keeping the meaning but lowering the temperature. In the response, she added a heartbeat's explanation for a local idiom, just enough to save face without making anyone feel lectured. Ethan Brooks stopped pressing his lips tight. Zaid leaned back, arms relaxing. When the meeting ended, no one clapped, but the weight of silence said enough. Zaid rose, moved past the delegates, pausing just a moment in front of Madison, his gaze measuring, neither granting favor nor feigning warmth. He nodded, then walked on. The hotel lobby greeted her with a hum of ceiling fans and a bark voice. Paul Hargrove blocked the reception desk, face flushed as if someone had grabbed his throat. Who do you think you are? A floor mop-playing interpreter? You've embarrassed this hotel. Madison didn't argue. She reached into her pocket, unpinned her name tag, and set it on the counter with a tiny decisive click. The sound closed the door, not on her career, but on a structure of contempt. She bowed her head as she had in the meeting room, her courtesy her own, not her job's, and walked away. At the entrance, Tyler Fox, the valet with the crooked grin, tipped his chin. You're the one who spoke Arabic. Huh? Feel like a hero now. A low whistle sounded behind him. Madison lifted her head, voice soft but clear. Heroes don't mop floors, but they don't mock the ones who do either. Tyler's grin shrank, his hands sinking deep into his pockets. The whistles cut off like a switch had been thrown. Night fell. At the front desk, a letter sealed with a UAE coat of arms arrived. Paul tore it open, smirking at the thought of an apology for the disruption. The short line inside read like command. Send her to the penthouse. I need to see her privately. Paul's cheek twitched. He slammed the phone onto the internal line. In the elevator, Monica Hale, the event manager, hugged her checklist to her chest and eyed Madison's uniform. You've caused enough trouble. This hotel doesn't need drama from housekeeping. Madison touched the edge of the notebook in her pocket, her gaze calm. Drama fades. Skill doesn't. Monica froze for half a second. Her clipboard slipped a little in her hands. The penthouse door opened to a wash of warm gold light. Sheikh Zaid sat at a glass table, a small box before him. Near the door stood Adam Rahman, a young aide with a habit of checking his watch like a pulse. Please sit, Zaid said. Madison sat, hands clasped on her lap. Zaid slid the box toward her. Inside was an envelope sealed with a UAE coat of arms. Adam froze, his fingers still lingering at the edge of his watch. Madison bowed to Zaid, a dip so slight it felt like a final signature, then straightened. The penthouse door closed softly behind her, the thick carpet swallowing every trace of sound. In the elevator, she slipped the invitation between the pages of her notebook. It wasn't to flaunt. It was to put it exactly where it belonged, among her notes on phonetics, dialects, and how to preserve a room's dignity. In the lobby, Evelyn, the bun-haired concierge, looked up just in time to catch Madison passing. She wanted to say, "I saw you working extra shifts all month without complaint," but silence was survival in places where petty power could cost you a job. Madison met her eyes and smiled, a smile that asked for no validation. Outside, Dubai's night stretched like a sheet of glass, glittering but without true weight. Madison drew in a deep breath, her hand resting on the notebook's cover. On its first page, she wrote a line in pencil for tomorrow. Where there is language, there is value. Then she closed the book. Tomorrow would bring Tess, the media, the rumors, even herself. But tonight her silence already carried weight, because it was built on respect, on precision, and on the unshakable dignity of a black woman who had stepped through a door others thought she didn't belong in. By early morning, Abu Dhabi was fogged like a mirror touched by breath. Madison Carter walked into the conference center in an unbranded black dress, her hair tied low, her flats chosen for a long day. The crowd shifted like a tide, microphones standing tall like a forest of masts. Around her neck hung a thin guest badge for the Language Advisory Council, light as paper, heavy with responsibility. She set her notebook down just as Rebecca Stone approached. Rebecca, a reporter with red lips and eyes sharp as a blade, gave her a smile that already carried a headline. Maid got lucky. How did you conquer your way here? The word conquer gleamed with mockery. Madison didn't flinch. She laid her palm on her notebook, steadying her breath. Grace doesn't speak languages. Work does. For a beat, Rebecca's smile faltered. A few cameras lowered half an inch. Pen scratched quickly. Work, not charm. The interpreter prep room was tight, almost mechanical. White light shone on confident faces, crisp ties, and sharp cologne. Carter Briggs leaned back in his gray suit, voice cutting through. I hear you skipped the line. From housekeeping to this table, golden ticket. Laughter rolled. Madison didn't respond. She opened her notes on Hijazi and Gulf Arabic dialects. Stress shifts, metaphors of tents and wells, how desert imagery shapes trust. She underlined the tricky terms, off-take agreement, capacity allocation, backstop instrument. Her pencil pressed phrases that preserved dignity while softening obligations. The technical trial began. One section used price corridor and voluntary pause instead of moratorium, a shift that carried legal weight. Madison rendered it smoothly, marking the voluntary nature without binding. The room eased. Carter's grin thinned. Leah Donovan, another interpreter, tilted her head, noting how Madison's timing matched rhythm without embellishment. By midday, the press briefing began. Madison stood at a podium that barely reached her height. She opened in classical Arabic, fastening her speech with two Hijazi proverbs. A tent stands firm when its stakes share the same ground. A word stands firm when its intent shares the same weight. Professor Hassan Omari rose, eyes glistening. I did not think I'd hear this cadence again from an American. The applause came full and round. Headlines shifted that afternoon, from maid to Gulf language expert. Yet whispers burned elsewhere. At the Crystal Alna in Dubai, receptionist Tara Collins joked on break. She's not even that pretty, must have caught the Sheikh's eye. A tabloid posted, a wink that changed her life at a Dubai hotel. Madison's phone buzzed nonstop. Acquaintances resurfaced with, wow, just luck. Look, the internet's talking about you. She silenced notifications, deleted apps, and chose her audience again. Text, people, respect. On a short flight back to Dubai for a forgotten file, an Egyptian boy chatted across the aisle. Madison leaned over, replying in classical Arabic. The boy laughed, his mother's face softening as she whispered thanks. A flight attendant, Chloe Hart, glanced at Madison's open notebook and muttered under her breath, even on the plane you have to study. Must feel important now. A few passengers looked up. It was a kind of invisible policing that hangs a mandatory humility tag on black women. Madison closed her notebook and lifted her head. Learning doesn't stop. Chloe bit her lip and turned away, her steps suddenly shorter. The next morning, before ministerial negotiations, a young diplomat with a dangling badge, Elliot Crane, leaned in. I've heard about you. You're here for photo ops, right? Madison set her papers precisely at the table's edge. Photos fade. Words remain. Elliot froze, his hand brushing his badge as though it had gained weight. When answering a group of interns, Madison pointed to the three principles written on her notebook's first page. 1. Respect first, persuade later. 2. Intent outweighs words. Find what the speaker avoids. 3. Saving face is the cheapest cost for a lasting deal. By afternoon, the OPIC secretary confirmed Madison as lead interpreting coordinator for the opening plenary. Ethan Brooks from the British delegation gave her a flat handshake, eyes averted but free of fake cheer. Moments later, Zaid Olfalon arrived. One small nod was enough. Madison understood. Trust didn't need performance. It lived in silence. That night, she reviewed terms once more. Concession, allowance, binding, non-binding. Price floor is not price band. Avoid moratorium for pause. At the bottom she wrote, clean start with respect. It was once meant for a mop. Tomorrow, it would be for the room. She switched off the light. The air conditioner hummed like a lullaby. Outside, city signs glittered. Inside, her notebook closed, her lightest weapon. The next day, the OPIC main hall stretched vast as an orchestra pit. Flags arched overhead, light spilling across a round table polished to a mirror sheen. Madison sat at the operational center, microphone glowing green, notebook open, pen resting along the spine. The opening speech began. The well runs dry. The wind rises. Translated literally, it sounded like cheap drama. Madison reframed it as changing conditions, sidestepping blame. A delegate proposed a price floor. Another countered with a price band. Madison aligned the terms, emphasizing auto-adjustments so each side felt they'd save face. When one delegate slipped, saying moratorium instead of voluntary pause, Madison anchored the phrasing back. Voluntary pause, not legally binding. The room steadied. Zaid gave the faintest nod. Ethan's shoulders loosened. In the back, highlighters changed color. During the break, a reporter shoved the MIC toward her. How does a hotel maid climb up to here? Dozens of phones rose like a wall of eyes. Madison stood tall, her voice even. I've never considered that job beneath me. Where there's language, there's value. A pause hung. One camera lowered. Not a headline. Grabber, but it laid a brick. That afternoon, bargaining turned sharp. A senior official used the word concession, a translation that sounded like surrender. Madison shifted it to arrangement, softening the blow into shared ground. When backstop instrument arose, she kept the technical phrase but added a gloss, a risk hedging tool, not a payout guarantee. The subtle correction steadied the room. At the closing dinner, dessert glittered on the long table. Each piece as fragile as glass.